May is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Month. In the following webinar, we focus on the roots of Asian stereotypes and trauma, barriers to mental health care, and learn about the history of Asian Americans in this country. For more information, go to jolenejang.com and join the Asian Allies Facebook group. Or that this is available for anyone who could not attend, and I know that there's a lot of VOA crisis counselors who wanted to attend. And the nature of their work is that when they're on call, they literally really are on call, and you never know when you're going to get a crisis call, and so they have to stop being a part of things like this sometimes. Totally understandable. So I know that they want to see this, and this will be made available on our internal programs at VOAWW. And yeah, I'll just get started and kind of ease into my introduction here. And you are recording now, right,
I'm
Jolene?
recording. Yep.
Okay, your note takers doing their thing and all that. I want to thank everyone for being here. And this is kind of a collaboration between some of our community professionals like Jolene and our Volunteers of America, Western Washington Behavioral Health, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program. And one of the goals behind this is to really be able to address issues that are related to mental health, and definitely diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, trauma, all of those elements are all connected. And the more that we know about how we can support people, address their concerns in different situations involving mental health, and also have that context, that historical context, which is so important when somebody's on the phone, they're in crisis, and they're maybe talking about race-based trauma or something like that, or they're talking about something that has to do with their sexual identity. The more that we know about their background, and also about maybe their cultural background, their racial background, those kinds of things, just the more effective we are. And then as a side note, I think as individuals and as professionals, the more we understand people who are from different backgrounds, different from ourselves, just it enhances our lives. It just makes us better humans, really. And it gives us that ability to forge and create more stronger connections, closer connections. And so I asked Jolene. Jolene was here last year. It is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month. It's a mouthful. And I wanted Jolene to come in and spend about 40 minutes or so talking about such issues as mental health access for Asian Americans or Asian Pacific Islanders, also some of the cultural barriers that might be in play that we aren't aware of, which for one thing, it could just be the stigma of seeking mental health could be stopping people or preventing people from seeking the treatment or the support that they need. So Jolene has a presentation. We will open it up in the last maybe 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. If you do have some questions, feel free to stick them in the chat as well. And I'm just going to hand it over to Jolene. This will be recorded, and thank you all for coming. Is that now we can't
I
hear?
need to unmute myself. That's
there
all.
you go.
That's all. All right. And you really nailed that, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. And I encourage all of you to get that acronym, spell it out, AANHPI. And the reason that it's so long is because Pacific Islanders are left out, and then specifically Native Hawaiians as well. So it's just to put in forth effort to make sure that a few more people are seen. And I also wanted to, first, let me introduce myself, Jolene Jang, and I am Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, fourth generation in America. I relate to the Japanese side because I have Japanese family that I know. I am wearing a red top with some gold earrings, brown straight hair with a white background. I am a 50-year-old non-disabled person, and I use she, her, and I'm broadcasting from Seattle and land of the Duwamish. Okay, so we're not only celebrating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month, it is also Mental Health and Jewish Heritage Month. And there is a lot of intersectionality between the three. So I'd first like to about you. So what are your perceptions of Asian Americans? And then we'll go to the other side and then talk about Asian Americans and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. So for that, go ahead and use your chat and type into the chat, what are the stereotypes that we have about Asians and Asian Americans? And also these are different groups. So in the chat, type that in. Look at that technology. Look at that, huh? Look at that. Submissive, smart at math, quiet, good with numbers. And no matter which group I'm talking to, it's going to come up with smart and hardworking and polite and quiet. So these are pretty standard. Family oriented, no kung fu. Mm-hmm. And just the other day, actually, I was in UW Rotary for a fundraiser, and I was talking to a gentleman, a white gentleman, and he's like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I talk about Asian Americans." He's like, "I studied karate." You know,
You're
it's
kidding.
like, so it's like that has nothing to do with me, and it's weird and awkward for me. Am I supposed to validate him? Like, what do I do? So all these stereotypes, that shows me that he's never met an Asian person before, probably. So some of these things are kind of clues to what the other person does or does not know. So stereotypes. So the problem here is people think that Asians are all alike and that we're all the same. And of course, that is not true. But I'd like to um, ask you what you know. Let's do a little quiz here. So the first question is, how many Asians are in countries are in Asia? And go ahead and put it in the chat. So is it 18, 21, 26, 36, or 48? And the reason I'm sharing a couple of these quick little exercises is because to show what people do and do not know. And many of us are in Washington State, which is number 5 in terms of where do all the Asian Americans live in the United States? They live in California, 30%. That's where Julie is. And then a number of us are in Washington State, where it's the 5 most populous for Asian Americans. Okay, so it looks like nobody knows. So looks like nobody knows the answer. Okay, so here's the answer here. It is 48. And I didn't know the answer either until a few years ago. So I guess the point is a lot of us do not know about Asian Americans. So 48 countries, and then we add Oceania. So that is the territory of in the Pacific Ocean. Oh, look at that. Pacific Ocean, where you have Micronesia, Polynesia, and all those a number of countries and islands. And we're all grouped together as one bunch, and people think that we're Chinese. All right, next question. Number 2. Who were the first Asians to settle in America? In this one, you're just going to go ahead and type in what the answer is. Okay, I think we're being a little shy here. Okay, Chinese, Japanese. Who were the first to settle in America? Okay, so who were the first Chinese? Okay, and so the guess is Chinese, and half of you said Chinese, and that is actually not correct. So it was Filipinos, 1763. So what happened is the Spanish galleons came over and they had indentured servants of Filipinos, and they jumped ship. And so they settled in New Orleans. Was somebody from New Orleans? Who was from Louisiana?
Jennifer Cook.
I'm
Okay.
from
Well,
Baton Rouge, about
Baton
an
Rouge.
hour outside of New Orleans.
Jennifer, did you know that there was a Filipino settlement?
I actually did not. Most of what we learn about early Louisiana history in the state of Louisiana is more about the French settlement that happened um, here.
Yes, yes, of course. Thank you. So St. Malo, the Filipinos were fishermen and shrimping. And so they set up there, and it was 256 years later that they actually got this marker to say they were there, because it's no longer. And it's never too late to give recognition. Um, it's sad, but also finally they're recognized. I'm going to go ahead and remove my extra arms there. Okay. Okay, question number 3. Which World War II unit was the most decorated of all American military regiments? So basically, was it the 101st, so the Air Force, or the Armored Division, Cavalry, or the 442? Okay, so we have a guess for the cavalry, the horses, 442, and then 101. Okay. 442. Go, Kevin. So the 442, I'm guessing most people didn't know about this group. So there were segregated units. There's a black unit, and then there was a Japanese American unit. So it was Japanese and Hawaiian. And right, the most decorated, yet nobody knows about them. So out of the 13,000 Japanese American, they were all born here. They earned in 2 years 18,000 awards. So in the history of fighting and the military, they're still the most decorated. And who wants to guess what? So the desertion rate for the Army was 18%. Out of these 13,000, what do you think the percentage was that deserted? Michelle says 0. Any other guesses? Okay, 1. Yeah, there was none. So I think as we look to that Japanese, it is a pride and shame country. Many of the Asian countries are, and it is loyalty. I don't know if you watch Shogun or any of the samurai movies. It's all about dying with honor and being faithful, and the kamikaze and everything. And so no deserters. So meanwhile, their families were incarcerated. So here they are behind the fences, all the families. My mother, who's Sansei, so she's 3rd generation, I'm 4th generation in America. She was lucky because when they were forced out, she got to be born in a hospital, not in a dusty horse stall. And I think you all on the West Coast are aware of these incarceration camps, but plenty of people don't know and also don't believe it. So this does have some impact on us. And here they are tagged up and sent away. So it's very unpopular to be Japanese back then. I'm not sure if it's popular right now, but my uncle, who's Chinese, he had a button that says "I'm Chinese." Right? So there are different times where you don't want to be Chinese, but then you don't want to be Japanese.
Here's yours, bow legs. And one for you, monkey face. And don't shout, there's plenty for all. Here you are, slant eyes. Everybody gets one. Ice cream. Well, that's that.
Were you able to hear that? Okay, so hey, monkey face, slant eyes, and Bugs Bunny. This is 1944. He handed these popsicles that blew up, just killed Japanese. So this is the type of media that was out there. Dr. Seuss has similar, and Dr. Seuss was racist towards everybody who was not a straight white male. This is a new discovery for me. I'm not super surprised. So in terms of people liking Asians or seeing us as Americans, not so much, right? So in terms of how are Asians and Asian Americans perceived, well, people who don't know, don't have access to be around people of Asian or Pacific Islander descent, they have yellow face, where, you know, white people are dressed up in yellow face, and it's obviously inaccurate. So blackface, I think we know that that's like not okay. When was the last time you think that yellow face was out there? Any guesses? You can put it in the chat.
Mhm.
Yesterday, nice. The movie Lucy. Oh, I don't know that. Okay. So here are the most recent ones that I'm aware of. So Ghost in the Shell and Scarlett Johansson, Trevor Noah, one of my favorite people. I think he was either interviewing or saw an interview with her about her role in Yellowface, and she was just like, I should be able to do whatever I want to do, and was just had no understanding of what that means. I think this is our last one here. Okay. So there was a study. This is a recent study. So this was last year of 6,000 Americans, 6,000. And they were asked to name one prominent Asian. And 52% of them could not name one. Can you? So go ahead. I'm going to reset and go ahead and type
Hey,
in.
excuse me, Jolene. I have
Yes.
a VOA person trying to get in, and unfortunately, our IT program needs to update her Zoom. Do you have a passcode at all that you can find? If you can't, don't worry about it. I'll just let her know.
Yeah, I do.
Could you
Five
stick it
three
in the? Oh, go ahead.
532
Hold on a
349.
second. Okay, 532. What's the rest?
349.
Okay, 349. Okay, I'll
No
try that.
problem.
Thank you. I'm sorry
No
to
problem.
interrupt.
So go ahead and yeah, start populating. Who are the prominent Asian people that you know? Who have you heard of? Sammy Lee. I don't know who Sammy Lee is, but I will look them up. Bruce Lee. I only know athletes and politicians. Yep. Jamie Chang. Also don't know. So what if I asked you, name all the prominent white people that you know? How long will we be here? So there's a huge gap of what people know about Asians and Asian Americans, and people really don't know anything. That is my experience, and I can speak with authority because I've given over 230 presentations, and I can verify. And the people in my groups are people who actually want to learn, and so I can't even imagine what happens with the people who don't want to learn. So there's a big gap, and I think I have one more question here. And by the way, so the answers that people gave, of course, was Jackie Chan. I'm surprised nobody said that. But he's Hong Kongese. And Bruce Lee, dead guy, 51 years ago. My parents went to school with him at UW. By the way, on Netflix, there is a really good program called The Warrior. And Bruce Lee wrote this when he was younger. And so now it's out there on Netflix. It's set in 1868 in San Francisco. It's really good. And Lee Gwyn says yes. You've seen it? Okay, cool. Okay, so those are people. So who is this guy here? Have you seen him? And then do you know who he is?
I know he's an actor, but I cannot remember his name. In fact, I think wasn't he in that movie that won all the Academy Awards
Yep, he
last
was.
year?
Yep.
Yeah.
So he everywhere all at once, and in Panda, Kung Fu Panda, any kind of movie. So this is the most prolific actor in America. Yet nobody knows his name, right? And this is standard. So here we are to say that Asian Americans are invisible. And by the way, with James Hong, he's been in over 715 films and television credits. And usually the evil villain. Sometimes he started out as a Chinese delivery guy. And 99.5% of his roles were stereotypical, usually caricatures. Okay, and so that's the education out there. So Asian Americans, what is it to be, phooey. So really, what is it to be Asian American? It means to be invisible. So as you are thinking about your patients and the people who call you, they feel invisible. And here we are, right back where we were. Okay, cut that out. Okay. There we go. And we're seen as perpetual foreigners and stereotyped. And this is standard, and I think proven through some of these little trivia things that just nobody knows who we are. And right now, Asian American history is not taught a lot. If so, it's a little bit. And it's also banned in some places. And then if we look at colleges, 30% of colleges are banning diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that also bleeds over to state agencies like in Utah and Arizona, probably Florida. And this also impacts other industries. For example, Julie and I are both in the event industry, and that does have some impacts. So this has wide-ranging impacts. And because, by the way, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, we weren't included before in diversity, equity, inclusion, hardly. And so now they'll never know who we are. We're always going to be seen as a perpetual foreigner. Our stories, they're not told, and we're excluded. In Hawaii, languages their language was banned, and we're targeted. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about what's happening with Asians, because why might your Asians be calling you? What are some of the things that are happening with Asians? How many of you have seen Civil War, the show that's out right now? Has anybody seen it? No. Okay. So it's in the theaters, and it's about the divided America. And when I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, this is probably happening, next fall or something. And I thought that I was just watching the news. And so here in this scene, there's a white guy with a gun, and behind me is an Asian guy. And so the white guy says, "What kind of American are you?" And he said, "Taiwanese." And then boom, he was shot and dead, right? And in contrast to how Asian Americans have been portrayed before, it's inaccurate, right? But this is reality television right here, that he was killed. And I see Asian Americans being killed once a week it's not always, I don't always see the actual video of them being shot or stabbed, but I do see pictures of after the fact and sometimes the video. And I think that people are not aware of this. And so why might your Asians and Asian Americans be calling you? Because they're concerned about their life. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on all the ways, but when you leave your home, when you're at, for example, when you go to CVS for some allergy medicine, so ching chong on the receipt and ching chong on the coffee machine, coffee thing. So all these little messages saying, "You don't belong here. I see you. I blame you for COVID." And there are just so many visuals, "Go home." And there'll be signs, "No Chinese here." COVID kills, and all this stuff. Personally, my aunt was followed from my house, Lake Forest Park, to Kenmore to Shoreline. And then I know three other Asian Americans. And let's see, it was Kenmore, Shoreline, and Linwood, who've had cars driven at them. And then my dad got a death threat. He did go to the police. They're like, "What do you want us to do about it?" And I've heard so many, a lot of Asians who have gone to the police and they don't want to do anything. So, do you see the idea of invisibility? Like we are speaking out, but people aren't hearing us. Or we tell our friends, "Hey, when I went out walking, this guy stopped and was like, 'Hey, blah, 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 come over here. I love you, blah, blah, blah.'" Um, and people are like, "Oh, no big deal. You're cute. That doesn't mean anything." Well, you know what? It does mean something to me because I don't know what's going to happen next because I have seen hundreds of violent attacks against Asians in America. And so that concern is real. And I do not walk alone anymore. I don't do it. And I am one who is very bold, extroverted, has gone all over the world by myself. Yet here, I don't feel comfortable. I think we can go ahead and just kind of, if anybody would like to just chime in or ask questions about this to kind of clarify, I'd be glad to share.
Well, I just wanted to
Yeah.
interject something because I think that sometimes people can think that you're talking about going out and people are being hostile and yelling, and sometimes it's driving the car close to someone. I mean, there's so many different ways that people can try and intimidate someone, but I'm wondering about how people react to it because I think so many people internalize that anxiety or internalize that stress or that fear so that if you just see them, you could see them at work and have no idea because maybe for cultural reasons, they're motivated to hide that. Whereas another culture or another person or
Hmm.
being in another environment, somebody might feel freer to express that. So I guess I just want, because I know there's several counselors or people at
Yeah.
mental health field work here, to don't take things for granted just because somebody's on the phone and sounds calm while they're talking about something, even if it's something seemingly traumatic, doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't suffering quite a bit.
Well said. And so let's say you go we're done with this call, right? And then you go ask your friend, you're like, "Hey, have you had any hate?" to your good friend who's, Filipino American. Just out of nowhere, you're like, "Hey, have you experienced any discrimination lately?" Right? They're probably going to say, no, right? Because why are you asking? Do you have the time? Do I need to explain to you? Are you going to feel bad because it was a white person who did it? So there's all these things that prevent Asians from coming forth. I started Empowered Asians, this group, so Asians could listen to each other and hear each other because many of us have completely white networks. And so when we said this thing happened to us, our friends are like, "Oh, it was nothing. It was just coincidental." I don't think, and they will make excuses for the stranger that did something. They were not there. So, that's kind of a gaslighting thing where it's my fault. I'm seeing things that didn't happen. So that is why many Asians won't say anything. Also, we don't want to complain, or bring any fault to anybody else. So it is really hard. This is my sixth speech this week, and there was a Indian American and a Korean American yesterday, and they were new. I think they were part of the C-suite. And it was pretty incredible to hear them share their story. They were told to share about their identity because they've never been asked that. So I heard from this guy who reached out to me after LinkedIn, in LinkedIn, saying, "Oh my gosh, in my 40 years, I have never been asked about my culture in that kind of way or to share about anything. And the way that these two gentlemen spoke, to me, they move and maneuver like a white male. You know, they have these high-end positions, and in order to get there, sometimes you kind of need to play the game and be a white male. But because they shared their story, many of us on the call are connecting. Oh, they do connect with their identity. But were very easy talking about discrimination. You know, they both just barely said something. But in LinkedIn, the Korean American says, oh my gosh, 2 or 3 times a month, I experience this and this and this. And, you know, I think it's a shameful thing, like you asked for it, or you are weak, or if you're tough, you don't say anything about it. So there's this thing that prevents people from sharing. Do you all want to talk about that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, if anyone wants to chime in, because I know with a lot of times these calls, what happens is you're listening, and then something will be sparked, you know, a memory or an occurrence. And I think that unfortunately we live in a society where rudeness and disrespect is like become kind of a norm. I mean, if you turn on the TV and you just watch some of the national news programs where people are calling each other names and then get on social media and the gloves are off, definitely, that I think there's a danger sometimes that we become numb, you know, and then you can be hit with a microaggression. You might not even realize it until 2 days later.
So feel free to chime in and, you know, ask questions. Well, what do you mean by that? Because it's hard. Like I'm new kind of to racism, which is ridiculous. I've grew up with a lot of privilege, even though I'm in white communities. I was very lucky to not be bullied all day long like almost everybody else. So go ahead. Somebody,
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is just an honest question, and forgive my ignorance in advance.
No problem.
I know I've got so much to learn, and that's why this was
That's
so
why you're
important to
here.
me.
Yep.
Yeah. I sometimes I don't know how I am to react. I don't know if this is going to make sense. I'm saying, oh my gosh, and that's appalling, because those things are appalling to me.
Mhm.
Those experiences that you're talking about, and then I was like, I'm part Hispanic, I'm part Irish, I'm part German, I'm part French. I am a mutt, and I personally I like that about myself. But I don't know how, when you're talking about you talk to your friends, and most of them happen to be white, that they kind of downplay what you're telling them. So am I hearing what would be helpful at that moment is to say, oh my God,
Yes.
what's going to happen? And, what are you doing to keep safe? How are you going to, can we help?
Yeah. Or I hear you.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Okay.
Like, do you see my eyes right now? I don't get that.
Yeah.
My friends are gone. They're not there for me. They don't, it's like I've been posting for
Oh
3
my God.
years. And in 3 years, 7 people reached out to me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I've got a big, huge network, and I'm a confident person. And yet my big network, like my friend who was, I was there for her when she was divorced. My other best friend, when she got cancer, I called her every day, and she was so thankful. Where is she? Right? Both of them. When my other friend got raped, there's zero anywhere, zero. And so listening is a big deal. And to say not unfortunate, oh, that person was attacked and killed, that's really unfortunate. No, that was a tragedy. So I think the term unfortunate, scrape that out of your vocabulary for all of you. That came up to me now because whenever I see unfortunate, it's usually like a death of like an Asian. If a white person dies, that's a tragedy. But when others die, it's not. So to answer the question a little bit, it's really just listening and saying, "Oh, that is terrible. I hear you. Um, what do you need?" And you must feel very terrible about that. I mean, just kind of validation. We don't get
Right.
validation. So, and this is still fresh, right? It's been 3
Right.
years. Pretty fresh because I see these attacks every single day. And if I pulled up Instagram, I'd probably find a murder from last week. There was an Asian who was shot in the head, and actually it was 2 teenagers, right? You didn't hear about that. Doesn't make the news. And so understanding that a lot of Asians may see this and may feel this, and but nobody believes them and doesn't understand how traumatizing that is.
I believe you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Well,
that.
I just wanted to add something.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes if somebody hasn't experienced
Mhm.
something, it immediately makes them feel uncomfortable because they're not used to. It's just like when people say, why are you always bringing up racial stuff? Why is it always about race? Well, if you're in the dominant culture, and I mean, I've gone places where, I mean, I was in Montana recently. I didn't see a black person for a week where I was. In fact, I didn't see a person of color. So if that, and that's nobody's fault. But if somebody's living in Montana and they're surrounded by people who look just like them, they probably, a bunch of white people don't sit around talking about being white. However, like you or I can turn the news on probably right now and see news about a hate crime or some type of discrimination or something going on, so that it's really just part of our normal lives. Just like if you live in a certain neighborhood, if you live in a gated community where there's no crime, you don't think about crime. But if you live in another neighborhood where there's a crime happening every 10 minutes, that's definitely on the front burner of your brain. So I think that people need to start to put themselves, if they can, in another person's shoes. And I'll just leave it here with, there was an exercise done, and this had nothing to do with race. It had to do with how men don't sympathize or empathize with women when they're being harassed. Because a lot of times men can walk down the street or go sit in a bar by themselves and nobody says anything to them. But if a woman walks down the street or, the wrong street, she can get cat calls, all kinds of, just forms of harassment. So they had this exercise where they reversed it, and they had men had to walk a mile while women, cat called them, said all kind of crude things. And some of the men, it blew their mind because they went, wow, I had no idea how traumatizing that can be, because it's something that they've never had to experience. So I think I always suggest to people, get out of your comfort zone, go to a neighborhood, spend the entire day where you're the only person of your racial background, and just see if you notice a difference.
And also know that it's not the same. So, so I had this argument with, so I was really active in the National Speakers Association, which is, 98% white. I was one of 7 Asians out of the 2,500. And there was one of the white guys who says, "Yeah, well, I go to Asia all the time and I'm the only one." And he's consulting, he's the hired person at these companies, so he comes in with status and he's white. He's like, "Well, I'm a minority too." And I'm just like, that is not the same thing. So it is important to go in different spaces, but understand, it is hard to understand. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a black man. But I
Tried to
listen,
tell you, Jolie.
but I listen to black men, and I read books and all these things. And my boyfriend, who's 6'2", and a black man, like, he doesn't understand, like, what it's like to be me, but he believes me. And that's the thing. We can't really know, but we just have to study and believe and trust that that was my experience.
And Michelle, by the way, put something in about power and not numbers. And Michelle, did you want to come off mic? Could you, or
Yeah, go
come
ahead,
on mic,
Michelle.
I guess, and just elaborate on that? Because I think that's an interesting statement.
For sure. I was just resonating for me about, it's not about whether or not you're surrounded by people who look like you or come in our culture, no matter what the situation is. The reality is, if you're white, you are the top of the power grid. And so no matter where you go, and that could be in the example of, being in Japan when you're only white executive, it is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a hard thing for a lot of people to really understand and get. But at the end of the day, it's not about, if I decide that I have the privilege of moving into a neighborhood that is up and coming, that doesn't mean that I'm blending in or I'm the same. I made a choice, and that's privilege. But even more so with white, it is power differential, and that is how it is structured right now, and that's really the base of really where a lot of this comes from, and othering people and trying to find ways to make sure that people know that, you know what, if you get too far, we're going to find ways to push you down. And it shows up in so many ways. You have microaggression behind you. We talked a lot about outward aggression and assault and all those kind of things, but it's all about power, not about the momentary circumstance you're in.
Thank you for sharing, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some more of the reasons why Asians may come to you, and then the stigma around it. So, because Asians are teased and bullied so much, and in the workplace completely, I do some consulting with Asian American women professionals where they're trying to move up the chain as an engineer, as a professional, but they are treated like an assistant, even though that's not part of their job, and they're given the grunt work, and then their bosses take their credit. So, like this one person, they weren't allowed to move up. Like her boss wasn't just like, no, we want to keep you, and so she moved this other direction. But so the bamboo ceiling is real. So the glass ceiling for women and lavender ceiling for LGBTQIA, and the bamboo ceiling. And there are a number of Asian Americans who are suing their employers now for the bamboo ceiling, but also the injustices. And so there's a lot of repression happening as an Asian American. A lot of times they're the only one. And people think of the model minority myth. Oh, they're such a good worker. They don't want the spotlight anyways. And I don't see them as a leader. And they're not going to complain. So we can give them the crap jobs. And so there's all these stereotypes that are very stressful in the workplace. And then when you leave, are you going to be safe on your walk? And then if you have a kid, wow, they're being bullied at school because they're Asian. So there's all these things. And code switching too. I think for Black people, it's more like a definite code switch. I think Asians, it's autopilot all day long. It's like code switching all day long. I think it was only a few occasions in my life where, oh my gosh, there's more Asian Americans than me. There's a whole room. I don't even know what to do. It's like oh, so wild and strange and comfortable. And I've hardly experienced that. So I think that the code switching is more 98% of the time, and that we don't know how to share because we're used to it. Does that make sense to you all?
Well, I think code switching can be so ingrained or so subconscious. It's just, I mean, it's so automatic. I mean, I remember when I realized that I was code switching without even realizing I was code switching, until someone had said to me, I was doing a radio show, and this is a white woman who I would see occasionally, older white woman, and she said I was doing a show featuring blues music, R&B, that kind of music. So I was really in my comfort zone. She said, I didn't know that was you, because you don't, I didn't know it was you until you announced your name. And I said, what is she talking about? Then I realized whenever I'm around her, I code switch. It's not that I'm being phony, but I think that you adapt, you adjust, much like you would in the weather. It's raining outside, you put on a raincoat. You do it automatically, because I think we're so conditioned to do it. And I think in certain cultures, sometimes there's more of an emphasis on it. Maybe in Asian cultures, it's like blend in, assimilate, don't
Yep.
draw attention to yourself. But then that can can affect you on a physiological level in terms of your health and your mental, your mental health. There's a Chandler has a
Mm-hmm.
comment piggybacking off the idea of the model minority. I think this idea makes the impact of some of the terrors that the Asian community faces less impactful to the majority population because they have it easier in society, but these negative things don't happen to them. So
Right.
it's like this perception, because I've often joked with Jolene in the past about, well, you're the low maintenance minority. Oh, the Asians don't ever have it. They never complain about anything. They don't have any problems. And it's so far from the truth.
And boy, does it make me mad. I just, when anybody wants to mess with me, I'm like, do they know how much I've been on TV? Do they know my social media? I just like, ugh. Um, and I was brought up to fight, so that is very unusual and not so Asian. Um, and so I'm not. I have a different story because I'm fourth generation. My dad was kind of a foster kid, and so he fought for people, and so that mentality, I come with that. But many people don't have that, and so the repression is real. Have any of you seen the Netflix show Beef? Anybody? Well, if you do have access to Netflix, I do encourage it because I think it will help you a lot to understand this whole repression. So it's this road rage thing. Victoria has seen it and loved it. Yeah, it was really intense, but it was really real. And Korean guy, Sunny, the producer, writer, he took a lot of his stories and put it in there. And there is a suicide piece that he put in there as well. And these are all from his stories. And it just shows how Ali Wong was like, oh, hi, Sarah. It's great. Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. How are your kids? And that's not what she's thinking. That's the face that she's putting on. And she really hates her life. And I think, as counselors out there, that's real. And you could see without any kind of pressure valve, Asians are going to explode. And the last 3 years, how I've been tapping into the Asian American community, which I was not really part of, there are these massive breakdowns because of the fear and the way they're treated at work and everything. Like, I don't wear scarves anymore because it's a choking hazard. Somebody may grab me, and there's plenty of people who also put sunglasses, put their hair back in a hat so people don't see that they're Asian. And by holding all this stuff down, by the time they get to you, it's real, And so, right, because families don't talk about Asian families, well, I don't know about Pacific Islanders, but certainly East Asians don't talk to their families, and they don't share what's happening. And if they did share with your parents, because the parents, right, were refugees, and Asian parents, right, they've had some struggles. So this is nothing, right? And I also have a couple other shows for you to educate you on. Good illustrations also on Netflix. Who We Become. It's 3 Filipinas in Texas, and they talk about George Floyd and COVID, the anti-hate against us, and some other topics, and show how they talk with their parents about it. And one of them talks about mental health, and her mom was like, just pray. You got to pray harder. Pray harder. Right? So that's in the Filipino community. I would say that it's not really accepted in really any of the Asian communities to go to therapy. Like, what's wrong with you? Buck up. Right? Because the parents and grandparents, they, like my ex husband, his parents from Vietnam, they escaped and had quite the story. And they had both double majors over there, and they came over, and then they're in the projects. And so, as a kid, what are you complaining about over here? So all the parents have had a really hard time. So, it's hard for them to understand also. Do you all want to discuss this? Because I feel like I guess you can just trust me with this. Um, Also, New Amsterdam. This is a show on Netflix too, and it does a beautiful job talking about um, real life situations and different identities, transgender, and they have a number of Asian situations there where it's a multifamily, and there's one scenario where there's a Chinese girl and her mom will not let her go to therapy. Um, I can't remember if she tried to, yeah, I think she tried to kill herself because her mom just wouldn't let her go to therapy. And her mom was like, no, 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 fine. You just maybe had a headache or something. And it shows that. So I think Netflix is doing a great job of centering some of these situations that are more beautiful than I can actually illustrate like that.
I was just
Yeah.
wondering about, because who's the person from Hercules again?
Julie.
Julie. I always wonder about different areas of the country, and maybe we could hear from Jennifer as well. I know I asked Jennifer this question, Jennifer Cook, before, because we live in Seattle, and Seattle is it's fairly liberal, at least within the city. If you start getting out in the suburbs, it gets a little different. But I always wonder, what is it like in Hercules, California, in terms of diversity? Is it just a really cool place to go on family vacation or what?
Julie, well, when you are closer, you might be walking around there.
Julie's probably walking around
Do share
Hercules.
with us.
What
And
about Baton Rouge, Jennifer? What's it like for diversity? You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
So in Baton Rouge, we are Baton Rouge and New Orleans, the two major metropolitan areas of Louisiana. They are both minority majority areas, meaning they both comprise of mainly people of color, mainly Black people. The South has a very large population of Black people due to the just history of America and how that has played into our culture. As for diversity and inclusion, I see most of how it's changed at my university. I am currently still in college. I'm at LSU, Louisiana State University. And you were talking earlier about how colleges were getting rid of their DEI programs. I actually used to work at our DEI office. I was a student worker there. It's no more. It died within like a year of me coming to school. And not because they just got rid of the program, but like it slowly got stripped back a little farther and a little farther each year, and now it's the Office of Student Engagement. But it started off as the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and then they got rid of the director for it because he had a disagreement with our new very Catholic university president. And then it got to Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and then it went to entirely just student engagement. But I think in the South, and I'm sure in other parts of the country too, we see a very big institutional move towards allowing people to kind of be hateful in whichever manner they choose. We have this portion of our campus called Free Speech Alley, which sounds like it'd be a lovely place. Except it really just caters to very ultra religious folks who will come and yell at students, women, minorities, LGBTQ. We had, I think, one get in trouble recently because they went and destroyed someone's table. We have like lots of groups that go out there and table like just to advertise for their clubs or organizations or whatever. And they decided to get in an altercation with our Asian American Student Association. And so they were throwing their snacks on the ground, saying like all types of terrible things. And so that's kind of how we see it most here. It's very, very forward, like not very hidden. There are plenty of microaggressions on top of all of that. But in the South, particularly in like more recent years, like tolerance towards hate, saying it's just their opinion, they can say whatever they want, it's free speech, like that happens more and more often, is being protected more and more by universities, institutions. And so things like that are kind of how we experience here. You were talking about how like Asian Americans, like we're kind of given like less prestigious jobs. I work at a state organization where most of the Asian Americans in our organization work in like a single unit, and it's like engineering, but the director of engineering is like an old white man, and so are most of the higher ups within that unit. And so the only Asian representation they have at my workplace is like these people who are working in a lower classified job, because we have that hierarchy by classification because of our state regulations. And so that's kind of how it looks down here. We do have a smaller Asian American Pacific Islander population in Louisiana compared to the West Coast, partially because of geography. I also know that because of the relocation camps, concentration camp, whatever, for the Asian Americans, most of those folks were moved to places like Oklahoma and outside of Louisiana. And so slowly and slowly, you started seeing more Asian American people within Louisiana, but most of that is in Oklahoma and places like that.
Interesting. Well, thanks for the window in. I wanted to introduce another term just in case you're not familiar. So coconuts, coconut, banana, and Twinkie. You know, you may know Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. Maybe like Ben Carson or Candace Owen or Will Smith's brother or cousin. So for, I mean, in the show Prince of Bel Air.
Oh, I see what you.
Prince of Bel Air, yeah.
It's
So for Asians, you know, it's yellow on the outside and white on the inside. I'm sorry, yeah. And so Asians will assimilate really hard because they're teased. Or maybe they're fourth generation like myself. And so I'm very American. And so I have to learn my other culture. And so there's a lot of pressure when people you know, I'm not really called a banana or Twinkie, thank goodness, but I'd be mad though. But I'd also, whatever. So understand that there's pulls on how Asian and how white, and it's challenging. And we're wrapping up here on time. So are there some questions that you have? I would love to be a resource to you all. And Lon might be a great resource too. So just saying. Do you have any scenarios that any of you would like to kind of talk through?
Well, go ahead, Chandler.
Are you sure? I gotta leave in a minute anyways, but I just
All right,
wanted
go.
to comment
Go, Chandler, go.
on like I know, go quickly, on your comment of like the banana, or like for like people of color, the Oreo, the, you know, white on the inside and then whatever color you are on the outside. You have to pick one in America. You can't be a blend of both. And so I think for you, Jolene, it's the losing maybe some of your culture from where your grandparents came from or great-grandparent came from, if you're fourth generation, and having to be, you know, the whitest version you can be here because that's what you're taught, that's what they want you to be in America. They've got this image of what an American looks like and you're trying to feed into that. But then for you, fourth generation in, you've lost a whole piece of you, and that's a very American value. I think of I'm mixed, so I'm black and white. Many generations in at this point, but I don't know anything about my heritage, because you come to America and you're supposed to be American and you're supposed to have these white values and you're supposed to talk the way they do and walk the way they do and want this big American dream. But then you've got people here who are disconnected because you've lost that whole piece of you. So yeah, I just think that's interesting. We want one thing, but then you can't be both halves of you. And that's just kind of the standard here. So it's tough. And then you always fall into this other, even when you're aspiring to be, you know, the perfect whitest version of you that you can be.
Yeah. And also thank you, Chandler. And with people who are mixed, it's like not black enough, not white enough, not, and then there's Korean adoptees. It's like, wow, they're white, but people are attacking them because they're Asian. And so there's
Yep.
all this balance of not knowing the identity, and it's just really difficult. I am 25% white, but I am clearly Asian looking. So not a lot of confusion here, but
I always get Latina, and I am not Latina. I'm half black and half white. So I was like, oh, like where
what
are
are
you from?
you? What
You're
kind
so
of are you
exotic.
from?
I was born in Vancouver. Like
Yeah.
I'm from here, but it is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough. And I mean, I can imagine, especially for the Asian community, you've got such rich culture back where maybe your parents came from or your grandparents came from, but then you come here and you gotta like wipe the slate clean up. It's
Even your
just,
name, even your
yeah,
name.
yes,
And
yep.
so
Mhm.
that's something where I hope you will all practice to say the different names, because that's the one thing that they were given. And let's say Chinese, let's say that, well, that was a big process, and there was like a whole family involved to find that name that was going to bring luck for the next whatever. I mean, there's a lot that goes into a name. So do your best to pronounce the name correctly. Try, do an audio
Mhm.
recording, like do all the things to show respect. Um,
Yep.
Kevin, we have Lon here, and
Mhm.
I would love to just hear I know we're at the
It's
border
all right
here.
if we go a few minutes over.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Do you want to
go for it.
introduce yourself and share a little bit of your background and what you do?
Sure, thank you. My apologies. My meeting ran late because I had a deadline I had to meet, but lovely to be here. Thank you so much, Jolene, for inviting me. Lan Pham, I am first generation Vietnamese American. I have been doing community-based work for over 25 years. Currently, I'm the director of the LA County Domestic Violence Council. And it sounds like we're talking about just diversity and how do we
You know what, Lon, what I'd love to hear from you is for your Asian clients, what are some of the, why do they come to you, and what are some things you can help our white friends and to address
Mhm.
Asians, because it's it's hard.
Yeah, thank you. And so my work has primarily been with systems, even though at one time I was a director of a nonprofit organizations in which I did work directly with clients. I no longer do that. I had a role of a funder, and now I do policy and convening. But I think in terms of diversity, my work is really centered on not only, like you said, the microaggression of how we treat one another with respect, but like what really is impacting our health, our livelihood, and it's a matter of life and death for many people, because in my work is domestic violence, and so it's the issue of access. It's because when you are either you have so two ways, right? I think that in one way that I think people of color, immigrant refugees, people who are first generation have issues with domestic violence, in which it's part of the identity is the fact that within our culture, there's a lot of stigma about coming out about domestic violence or being a victim or survivor. And it is very complex because I can't broadly say that all culture are the same, but I can say in general that sometimes that there are very specific belief about either religious, familial, and things in which it is it is stigmatized. It can be shameful to sort of like like share, what is it? Share your dirty laundry. So a lot of people have those issues in which that issue is in all families and communities, but it plays out many different ways. Now, how it becomes, I think, very harmful in being either stereotyped or being marginalized when it comes to access is that one is it's very challenging for survivors to come forward because of the stigma. Secondly, is that there are a lot of institutionalized racism that exists that does not support people who are not either not English speaking, don't know the laws, don't know the languages, or that there are specific policies that marginalize communities. And so it makes it really hard for people to access services, even when they do come forward, which is already a major step for them to come forward. They can be discriminated based on what they look like, their lack of language, or by law enforcement. And so it's scary for people to come forward to law enforcement. So people don't, and then people stay longer in very harmful situations that put their lives at stake. Or sometimes people do call law enforcement and then they become the victim of law enforcement.
Yep.
And so I think that it plays out in, so I think it, the interpersonal violence of just stereotyping people or being mistreated based on where you look, I think that that's one level of violence. But I think the unspoken institutionalized racism that exists is even more harmful, is because it is this perception that everything's fine and all the systems are set up to work for you, and they don't. And I think that that's even more harmful. And so I'm privileged to be able to sort of do the work that I do, and in partnership with a lot of folks within systems and within nonprofit organizations to really address these issues. And I really do think that it's a partnership between community and people within systems. And because it can't be that community people are just voicing and system people are just like hearing and not doing anything. So I think it's really important for people within systems to recognize that there are opportunities to really relook at how we do work, that one size fits all doesn't fit everyone. And I think that at the end of the day, it's not about, oh, that person is Asian, so I'm going to treat them a certain way, or that person's Black, because I think that's still a stereotype, because not all Asian people are the same, not all Black people are the same, not all Latinas are the same. It's more of a very client-centered approach. And so when we do training, we talk about a victim-centered, client-centered approach. Is who is the person and what is it that they're asking for in terms of assistance? And are we providing them with what they need? Because ultimately it's really about them and each person, and violence and I don't know, other health issues are very intimate, I think, when it comes to individuals. So I don't want to, we don't want to stereotype and base our approaches to helping based on also what we think of people based on how they present themselves. So we allow for people to tell us who they are, self-identify, and tell us who they are, what they need, and what are their challenges. Because I mean, you're totally right, Jolene. I mean, there's an Asian person, but it could be fourth generation person who may not have the same needs as a first generation immigrant person who may have these. We have people that have come to us in which they have come out to their family, and their family is like, no, you stay because, you're gonna bring shame to the family by leaving your relationship. And I can't say that all Asians are like that, because it's not, but some aspects of, the culture about saving face and also the filial piety. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but like really helping your parents, like when you're being married, I had a lot of folks in which when I worked at the API Women and Family Safety Center in Seattle, and we work mainly with immigrant and refugee survivors, a lot of them were brought over by their American citizen husbands. And the abuse happens because, abuse happens in Asia too, but the fatality increases when you come to the US. Why is that? It's because when you're in Asia and you're in an abusive situation, you can go back to your family. You have a whole extended family that can support you, intervene, and provide you social support. When you come over here, you're by yourself. You don't speak English. You don't have money. You don't have resources. You don't know where to go. You don't even know that services exist. Yep. You don't even know what programs to do. You don't know how to file a protection order. And so you are very isolated, and abuse exploitations happen in isolation. And so I think not only in Asian communities, I think all immigrant communities, I think, experience that. But I think each community experiences it like at the macro level differently. Because I think, for instance, I can say the Black and African American community and the intergenerational oppression and racism that exists for many generations places people in spaces in which people don't have trust in law enforcement, but people need to feel like they resolve the issues within their own community. And I think that that also has issues of isolation and lack of access. And also, I think that there's not a lot of people who provide services who are in systems that look like you. So I think that a lot of times, like, these nuances are everything's in the gray. It's very hard to train also. It has to be sort of a lived experience. I think it has to be like a practice experience. So I think it's just an ongoing challenge, I would say, for systems to not only have culture, diverse, the diversity, equity, and inclusion protocol, just so that even if because you can't train people, I feel like you can't train people out of the issue. I think it has to be policy, but at the same time, the training also has to be continuous, is because we deal with this all the time. I have to say, not just in LA, but in Seattle too. It's like you can train someone to be culturally, quote unquote, sensitive, but if they do not have that experience, I feel like that is much more challenging for them. And so it needs to be something that is practiced on a regular basis, and it needs to be institutionalized. And I think policies need to recognize the diversity of its clientele for things to work. Because if you're setting a bar, you say, you have to meet this bar to get the service, or you have to meet this bar to gain safety. That's how people fall through the cracks. So,
and I also want to accentuate, Lon, to everybody else, representation matters. So if you have no Asians in the group, that I can choose from, I've already been trained that my friends who are super liberal do not care. So how are, so I don't, white people, do they really, And so representation matters. And Lon was talking about the nuances. And also, like, I'm not, a Samoan is trying to help me. I'm fourth generation Japanese, Chinese, Swedish. So it is really important to have representation of all different identities inside of the organization. So Kevin, go ahead and send it over to you. I'll be around, but go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Unfortunately, we have to end. But Jolene, if you could make sure you put your, I guess, your website in the chat. I always love to stay in touch with people. I mean, I'm already in touch with certain people on the call, but I will put my email in the chat as well, because I would love to just act as a resource or share information. I believe in power in numbers, and just supporting each other, because we basically all have the same goals. So the more we get to know each other and how we can work together and help each other, the better. So I'm just going to type my name in there, but here's my email address.
And Kevin has a podcast and about 1 billion things going on that he's involved with massive social media. I have a number of resources on my website, and I also have a podcast, Aren't Asians All Alike? And I think it is really helpful to start listening to different voices and hear these raw voices, because it's hard. And I know that training doesn't happen, or if it does and it includes an Asian, it's like once every 4 years. So.
Well, thank you, Jolene. Thanks to
Yes.
everybody. And, this is an ongoing journey. So we've all got something to learn, and take what we learn and then apply it, and just keep moving forward, pushing the needle forward. So have a good evening, and hope to see all of you at some point very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Lon.